Okay guys, well this is another video for the Mystery Teachings research notes, and this is for the students that understand the language of symbolism or are at least gaining an understanding for the language of symbolism. And so if you want to fully understand what is being discussed in this video, you'll need to make yourself familiar with the Mystery Teachings, because they will show you what the number codes and the symbolism actually means. And you'll also need to see the 13 real tribes of Israel, so you can understand how that is then connected to the messiahs and the divine ones and the 4 thrones within the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? And you'll also understand why we can call them the 13 tribes and the 12 tribes, and why sometimes they're interchanged. And so you can see that we now have a connection with all of the tribes and the elements, the directions, with the Kabbalah, with tarot, with the playing cards, and with the Mazzaroth zodiac. And so we are seeing all these different keys so that we can get more of an understanding of what the symbolism is speaking to us. And this is why I say that this video is one for people that understand the language of symbolism. So what we're going to do in this video is just basically, I'm going to decode Vitruvian Man. I'm going to decode Vitruvian Man with some of the text that Leonardo da Vinci left. There is some of the text that I'm going to have to look more into because it is more involved, but for the main part of what we want to find here, we can just start with the first part of the text that Leonardo da Vinci left for us. And I look at Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo as conduits of divinity, who were working through their divinity for the good of the all, because they wanted to save this information for us from these creatures that had an agenda to enslave us by stealing the knowledge and basically the memory of who we were. And so they had a definite intent to relay this information for a time when there was going to be a consciousness expansion, because the ether returns, and once again consciousness within humanity begins to get an understanding for symbolism and the archetypes and sacred geometry and what that means. And so that's basically what we're using now to understand the language of symbolism. And when we use symbolism to speak to us, and sacred geometry and the numbers, we know that they can't manipulate that information, where they can manipulate words, they can change words around, and we're finding that in Scripture with how they've hidden the Messiah, Jesus, within certain other characters. And so due to the symbolism, we can now reveal where they do that. And so this video is basically going to be me just decoding this. And so, if I do tend to tangent off, or I do make a mistake here and there, this is just like a raw video. I just really want to get my insights out onto video. As I said, I want to come back and actually then refine everything and add more information in, because that's normally what happens. I just really give you guys the bones of what I'm finding, and then I go and have a look at other information to kind of colour in the picture that we're getting. That's how I look at it. And so I'll just try and show you in the best way I can the connections I'm making to Vitruvian Man, the information that I'm actually finding that was encoded within Vitruvian Man, and how it is connected to the 12 tribes of Israel. And so we'll just look at the first part with the first bit of numbers, and then we'll come back to the other part, which is more in depth, and you'll know what I mean. So let's first have a look at Vitruvian Man and have a look at the information that he left us in the text, okay? And he left us all of these measurements. So in this video today, that's what we're mainly going to look at. There's also these measurements here too with more information. But we're really going to have an understanding for these ones first. And this is how the language of symbolism works, because when we're understanding and learning symbolism, it's taught to us in layers. And so we understand the first layer, and then that unlocks the next layer. So mainly in the video today, we're going to just look at the information within the first part of the text. So before we go and have a look at the information, let's just see what we can visually decode from Vitruvian man and what was hidden within this diagram. Now, to start with, it was never called Vitruvian man. You can't really find anywhere that Leonardo da Vinci called it Vitruvian man. It was called Vitruvian because he used the elements within an architect and philosopher from the ancient Roman times called Vitruvius. And so he used those elements that Vitruvius used to use to build structures, and it was based on the elements of nature, and he used that on the human body. And so the Vitruvian man was just something that became attached to this diagram, because really we're not seeing Vitruvian man, we're seeing man and woman. And so when we look at man, we have to understand that within man there's always an element of woman too, and vice versa, and especially with the messiahs. And so what we're actually seeing here are the first two messiahs, the firstborn, through which everything else emanates. And so the first messiah is the messiah that is the first mental emanation from divine intelligence, and that is the tribe of Dan, because the tribe of Dan is ruled by air and the mental. And then from the mental, it is brought down into foundation, and this is why we see Reuben and man is actually ruled by Malkuth on the Kabbalah tree of life. Okay, and then this is like the pillar between us and the divine that never changes. And then from that, we get emotion, which is what Ephraim encompasses with water and chokmah, and Binah, which is fire and will. And this is where we also understand that the pentacles are actually representing God's law brought down onto foundation. So sometimes within destiny there are certain laws that cannot be circumvented, and this is what this represents. So now when we look at the language of symbolism and apply it to scripture, we have to understand that stone and the pentacles and the pentagram is also representing this information. And we see this too in the Tuatha De Danann. When we look at the 4 different thrones within the Tuatha De Danann, this throne that's connected to Judah is actually called the Stone of Destiny, and it's represented by the stone. And so this is why we now need to, look at stones and rock symbolism that we see in scripture or anywhere with different eyes, because we now are starting to understand the language of symbolism. And so symbolism also changes in different contexts as well, okay? We have to understand that it transitions because it's a language. Okay, just like we have certain words that we can use that mean 2 different things, this is the same in symbolism. It's all dependent upon the context of which that symbol's used within. And this is why we have to start understanding the language. Because, as I said, words have been corrupted. Okay, it's easy for them to change the names and hide the Messiah. But when we use the symbolism to try and find the Messiah in Scripture, we can do that because we know it's always represented by the eagle and Kether and swords, and we know that Reuben is always represented by man and Malkuth and earth and wands and clubs, so it makes it easier for us to decode them. And so this is what is represented here with the man at the beginning here. This is the first emanation from the divine intelligence, okay? And this is why we see on the cross Jesus, okay? Represented on the cross, because it is through Jesus that all the other messiahs are created, as well as the female messiah. And then from the other male messiahs that are created from the first begotten, their female messiahs are then also created. And then from that time on, it is the female that brings God down to the physical plane. But the first emanation of the divine mind is done in this sequence. And this is why we see that Jesus is on the cross, because it is through him that all else is first brought into existence. And Jesus is like the mental reflection of divine intelligence on foundation. So are all the other messiahs, okay? The 8 messiahs, which are also counted as 4, and we'll see this in the decoding of Vitruvian man, how even, in the information that he's left us attached in the text, that the messiahs can be seen as whole, which is 4, or they're also seen as 8, okay? So we'll have to be mindful of that when we see this information as well. Now, what we see here in Vitruvian man is we've got the male on the 4 sides of the square. We've got the head, the feet, and then, his 2 hands touching the square. And then we've got the female at the corners, and this is where I'm saying that it can be 4 and 8, because the square is both 4 and 8, because it's got 4 sides and 4 points. So it can be seen as a 4, but it can be seen as an 8. Okay, so this is where we also see this represented in yin and yang. Okay, we can see it as the whole, and we can see it as 2. So now we see that we've got the first begotten, and from the first begotten all else emanates, and then this is where we see that the female is behind the first begotten son, and we can see it's a female because we see she's got a hip, and males do not have hips, and he has drawn a hip there. And we can also see there's a difference in their faces that he's shown us. So this is the face, and when we actually put the square on so we can only see half, we can see that the left side is different to the right side, because we're seeing the male represented by the physical and the sun, and the female represented by the ethereal and the moon. We see the male with his eye that's light, and his hair light, and he's masculine, and then we see the female here, and she's got the darker eyes, and she's got the more refined neck. Okay, so we're seeing 2 different representations in the features on the face as well, shown to us to give us another clue of what we're seeing here. And so this is what the crucifixion actually stands for. And so it's quite funny when you actually see people going out and nailing themselves to crosses, when it's really just, symbolic. And this is why, we really have to start understanding that's what Scripture is, and you've got to read it through the language of symbolism. And if you don't understand the language of symbolism, well, then you just become the kindergarten people that really play it out in quite insidious ways sometimes, and it's really quite sad, because if they just knew how to read the language of symbolism, they'd find the truth. And by doing that, you just have to go and be informed. And that's what I said, anyone that's just following this for the first time, you just have to go and look at the mystery teachings where we've uncovered the different tools required to understand what the symbolism is telling us, and we've just applied that knowledge. And this is how we've come up with the truth of what they were hiding, of why they have locked it up under the Vatican, okay, why they went and slaughtered their way across Europe. Okay, it's all to hide this truth from us. The richest organisation in the world, has this locked up and tells people this story, yet people think that it is, something that we can just dismiss out of hand. I mean, all of this information was left for a reason. Do you think all of the ancients left this, just for the sake of it? And so we can also see a rainbow here behind the Messiah, which is showing us that the angles of light change. Now there's this V here, okay, as well. And, I would even think that these kind of clouds, the way they look, could even be symbolic of Orion, the nebula, even though the artist didn't get it exactly right, because they weren't really the pure conduit that some of these artists seem to be, I think we should keep that in mind, that this could be what this is representing symbolically, because we know it is all connected to Orion and the light of Orion, the king, God, returning to the physical plane with the ether. And this is what the dove also represents, the kether. You know, it's God consciousness within the ether being brought back down through the messiahs onto the physical plane. And we see the female messiahs represented here, and we see that the palm leaves, guys, represent a connection from foundation to the ethereal. When you have a look at the symbolism behind the palm leaf, and I'll leave that for you to go and do, because remember, I don't put everything out for you guys. You do have to go and seek this information. Go and have a look at what the palm leaves symbolize, and you'll see that they symbolize a connection from the foundation, the physical, to the ethereal. It's like our antennas, okay? They're representing like an antenna, basically. In some way, that's how I see it anyway. I mean, as I said, symbolism can be applied to you if it reminds you of something else in nature, okay, that has that meaning behind it. Symbolism talks to us in all different ways, just like people have different dialects, you know, within the language we speak. It's the same within symbolism. We can all look at symbolism and allow it to speak to us in the way that we consciously understand it and process it. Because we're all different, guys. This is the chaos factor that plays out in humans. This is why drugs never all work on, you know, all people the same way, you know, and some people are allergic to things and some people aren't. I mean, there's always this factor that gets played into it, that we can never always put one rule on anything when it's to do with the creation of us, because we're all different facets of the creator. We're all different, and this is what Vitruvian man is also showing us. So we also see Hermes here represented, and Moses, okay, and this is the intermediate intellect between us and divine intelligence, the king, okay, that's what he represents. And okay, and so we see again over here, just wanted to show you a few more of the crucifixes, okay. We've got the female Messiah, I would say, here, closest to the Messiah. We've got the lamb here with the cross, okay. And we do understand too that the cross is representing the 4 different tribes, okay. So we've got tribe of Dan on the north, okay, tribe of Reuben down here, Malkuth, okay, south, and then we've got the tribe of Ethan over here in the east, and west we've got the tribe of Judah, okay, which can be 2 that are interchanged, but that's how they look on the cross, okay, if you're using the directions. So that's more information that we have to look at now when we look at crucifixions, is that it's actually symbolic of all the tribes. And so then we actually look back at the information now of where can we actually find information of the other tribes then? Are they only showing us the one Messiah here, or are they giving us more information to show us about the other tribes? Well, we know we've got the Grail here, so this is definitely the female Messiah because we've got the Grail behind her, touching her. And then we've got the female aspect of God, because I do believe that that is what the mother of Jesus represents, the Virgin Mother of Jesus as well. I think that represents the female aspect of God that created the first emanation, because we have to understand that there is a female aspect within God too. That's why it splits upon mental creation into wisdom and intellect and male and female, and there's a female influence that causes that. There's a causal effect that is female that for that to happen, and so that's why I think that they symbolize that here as Jesus's mother. But it's not a horrible thing, really. They've just turned it around into something horrible. It's not. It's just showing us that, yeah, Jesus is the Son of Man, because Jesus is the first emanation, the first begotten, and the one that all else emanates from on the physical plane. But as I said, there are 3 other male messiahs, so there's 4 male messiahs, and then there's 4 female messiahs of each direction as well. That's the part the church leaves out too. but you'll normally see them represented somewhere. You know, they do hide it in the symbolism, but you will always see Mary Magdalene represented, because they do have to have that female somewhere for their symbolism to be true. They do have to show her somewhere. So we see now with Vitruvian man, just by looking at it visually, we've seen the hip, we've seen that we've got the 4 and the 8, both shown by the square and where they're touching as well. And we also see that the face is representing the 2 different characteristics. So let's see what he left us in the text. So what I've done is just kind of taken this from Wikipedia. So he goes on to say that a palm is 4 fingers, a foot is 4 palms, a cubit is 6 palms, 4 cubits make a man, and a pace is 4 cubits, and a man is 24 palms. So what he's actually describing here is the macrocosm of man and the microcosm of man. So he's basically showing us actually the microcosm, the reflection of the macrocosm of the Creator that is brought down as man onto foundation. And so that's what he's showing us within this coding. And so the first part of the coding, he says a palm has 4 fingers, 4 messiahs. Now, remember how I said we think about God placing his hand down upon Gaia as though that is something that never changes? And we can also see this in the pentacles, which represents 5. Okay, and we see this in the 5th chakra that represents a destiny, you know, and so this is where we see will and intent expressed, and destiny of the Creator expressed as well in this 5. And so if we imagine that the Creator's hand, thumb and 4 fingers, is placed upon foundation to bring down the stone that never changes, the law that never changes onto foundation. Okay, but remember that we see this as a whole. Okay, so there's also the element of the female within this 4 fingers, but it says a palm has 4 fingers. Now, if we think that God has 2 palms, well, that would mean that God had 8 fingers. So we can see even within this symbolism, there is more information to be found. Then it goes on to say a foot has 4 palms, and 4 palms equals 16 fingers. Sorry guys, I haven't even edited any of this, so just follow along with me. So we've got the 4 fingers now within the palm. So we know that when a foot has 4 palms, that he's talking about 16 fingers. So now we've got the 16 other divine ones that make up the 24, okay, within the foot. Okay, because the 4 palms are now equal to 16 fingers, and we know the 4 fingers were equal to the 4 messiahs, and that, so we can now get this coding for the 16 fingers. Okay, so 16 and the 4, which is really the 8, because they're counting the messiahs individually, turns into 24. But then we actually have 24 down here because we've got a cubit equals 6 palms. 6 palms equals 24 fingers. So now we have all of the divine ones accounted for. Remember too that there are 6 divine ones in every throne. Okay, so remember down here, each of these thrones represents other tribes as well, okay? Other divine ones represented under the tribe of Dan. Down the bottom here we'll see it. Asher, Naphtali. Reuben has Gad and Simeon. Ephraim has Manasseh and Benjamin. And Judah has Issachar and Zebulun. So they're the 6, because remember, 2, 4, 6. Each tribe accounts for 2 of the divine ones, the male and the female. So we see that also in the coding that he's left for us. And then he says 4 cubits make a man. Well, 1 cubit is 24 fingers. But if we look at the 4 races, because remember, we're only looking at one tribe when we look at the tribe of Judah, or the tribe of Israel, or the tribe, you know, that's just one Messiah with 12 tribes attached. Sorry. Okay, let me just clarify myself. Each of these thrones also works in the macrocosm of symbolism to represent each Messiah, and then what each Messiah actually brings down from the divine intelligence as well, which is its own 12 tribes. Do you understand? This is why it brings it up to 96. And really, when you include the Messiahs again, as we do that carbon copy, because they're really there but they're not there, remember that's why it's the 13 and sometimes the 12, you get 104. And this is the 104 columns that they built for Zeus, built for all the immortals, the divine ones, in the Greek mythology. And so we see that there too. So he is even showing each race is now being represented in the 4 cubits, which make a man. And so we're seeing how they're making man from the creator, from the macrocosm of man. Okay, and then it's got a pace equals 4 cubits. So a pace is actually talking about the entire races. When we talk about the red race, the black race, the white race, and the yellow race, we can call them a pace. And then he just goes on to once again say a man equals 24 palms, which is 96 fingers. And when you count all of the divine ones through each of the races, the red, white, yellow, and black, you will get 96. So we can see that he actually encoded this information within Vitruvian man in the texts. Okay, he actually put it in the text here. The texts that were accompanying Vitruvian man, it's right here. Now this is the other information that I'm not going to go into yet because it gives us more information in regards to the proportions of man, which is all about the architect from Rome called Vitruvius, who built his buildings based on these principles of nature. And so what Leonardo da Vinci did was built man based on Vitruvian's, thing of nature. So, this is exactly what we're seeing here. All right, so let's just go down here and I'll just read you the last part down here. The points determining these proportions are marked with lines on a drawing. Below the drawing itself is a single line equal to the side of a square and divided into 4 cubits, of which the outer 2 are divided into 6 palms each, 2 of which have the mirror text. So he has actually written this in mirror text. He's actually showing how the divine emanation of the creator's mental expression splits in 2 to male and female and mirrors. And he calls it palm eye. And then the outermost 2 palms are divided into 4 fingers each anointed digi, or digi, actually, ditty. So digital, what do they call you? Digit, they call your finger. Okay, ditty, I think it is. So there you go, guys. They've accounted. He's actually accounted for the 8 messiahs here, okay? Calling them the ditty, which is the digits on the palmy. He's all accounted for it. It's all in the text as well. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put everything underneath. As I said, this is just raw. I'm sorry if I've just kind of gone a bit over the place. I've just tried to get this out. So now I've got it actually out there. And as I said, I can come back and then define this and put it out properly like the mystery teachings have been done for everybody. Okay, guys, well, I hope you really enjoyed that because I just was really blown away when I saw that in the text because it's the first time I really looked right into it. So there you go. He was talking all about the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, as always, peace out.